Some conflicts are just battles, but every now and then, a conflict comes along that literally changes the world. And that is exactly what the Persian Wars were. We're talking about an epic struggle that pitted a tiny collection of city-states against the biggest empire the world had ever seen. It is the ultimate David versus Goliath story, and honestly, its outcome shaped everything we think of as Western history. All right, let's just jump straight into it. Take a look at this map. Just look at it. On one side, you've got the Persian Empire. We're talking a massive, unified superpower that spans 3 continents. And then, over here, you've got Greece. And Greece isn't even one country, right? It's just this collection of tiny, fiercely independent city-states that were usually fighting each other. The mismatch is just staggering. So you have to ask, how in the world did a fight like this even begin? Okay, so to really get a grip on this, we're going to break this story down into 4 parts. First, we'll look at the tiny spark that started the whole fire. Then, the giant invasion that came next. After that, we'll get to the absolute turning point of the war. And finally, we'll see what kind of world they built after it was all over. All right, section 1. So what was it? What was that one little spark that lit the fuse on this whole thing? Well, it all started a long way from Athens, right on the fringes of the Persian Empire. It all kicks off with something called the Ionian Revolt. You see, there were these Greek cities over in what's now Turkey, and they were living under Persian rule. Well, they got tired of it and rebelled. And here's the fateful part. Athens decides to send ships and soldiers to help them out. And together, they don't just raid a village, they march inland and burn the major Persian city of Sardis right to the ground. For the Persians, this was absolutely unforgivable. Who were these upstarts from Athens they'd barely even heard of? So, as you can imagine, the Persian king Darius the Great was, let's just say, he was not happy. He was furious. And his response was fast and laser-focused right on Athens. He sent this huge naval expedition, and they landed on the coast at a place called Marathon, only 26 miles from the city itself. Their mission was brutally simple: make Athens pay. But what happens next is something nobody saw coming. It completely shocked the ancient world. The Athenian army, even though they were way outnumbered, they charged the Persians, and against all odds, they won. A huge victory. And yeah, this is exactly where we get the legend of the Marathon. The story goes that a messenger, Phidippes, ran the whole 26 miles back to Athens, yelled, "Rejoice, we conquer," and then just dropped dead. It's an incredible story, and for Athens, this victory gave them this incredible, almost unbreakable self-confidence. Okay, so that brings us to our second act, the Great Invasion. Look, if the Battle of Marathon was just a raid to punish Athens, what came next was on a completely different level. This was an all-out war of conquest. About 20 years later, Darius's son, King Xerxes, he comes back. And this time, he brought an army and navy so massive, so overwhelming, that the goal was simple: wipe Greece off the map for good. So, you're the Greeks. You're facing total annihilation. What do? You know you can't win a straight-up fight. So they came up with this really smart 2-front strategy. For the land war, they decided to use geography to their advantage. They'd funnel that huge Persian army into these super narrow passes where their numbers wouldn't matter as much. And for the sea, this brilliant Athenian leader named Themistocles convinced everyone to build a powerful new fleet, a whole new navy, to take on the Persians at sea. And that land strategy? Well, it led to probably the most famous last stand in all of human history. You've heard of it, Thermopylae. It's here, at this tiny coastal pass, that the Spartan King Leonidas and his 300 elite royal guards stood against the entire Persian army. For 3 whole days, they held that pass. They caused unbelievable casualties. And, more importantly, they bought the rest of Greece priceless time to get their act together. In the end, of course, they were overwhelmed. They were killed down to the very last man. But their sacrifice, it was never, ever forgotten. This quote here, this was their epitaph, supposedly carved right there at the pass. It just perfectly captures their courage and their sense of duty. The story of the 300, it became this incredible rallying cry for every Greek. But even with the heroism at Thermopylae, the Persians broke through. They marched south, and they burned Athens, which had been evacuated, to the ground. Things looked really, really bad for the Greeks. But that brings us to Act 3, the turning point. This is where naval genius and a finally united Greece would turn the tide of the war. And boy, did that naval strategy pay off. At the Battle of Salamis, it was just spectacular. The Greek fleet basically lured the enormous Persian navy into these tight, narrow straits. And in that cramped space, the big, bulky Persian ships just couldn't turn. They were sitting ducks. The smaller, faster Greek ships, the triremes, just zipped around, ramming and sinking them one after another. And the craziest part? King Xerxes was watching the whole thing from a golden throne he'd set up on a hill, just watching in horror as his supposedly invincible navy was completely destroyed. Salamis was the battle that really broke the back of the invasion. The very next year, in 479 BC, the Greeks delivered the 1-2 knockout punch. On land, at the Battle of Plataea, the biggest Greek army ever put together, led by the Spartans, just crushed what was left of the Persian army. And get this, on the very same day, the Greek navy went over to Mycale and wiped out the rest of the Persian fleet. Just like that, the war was over, the Persian threat to Greece was gone. So, there you have it. The Greeks pull off this impossible victory. But the story doesn't stop there, not by a long shot. That brings us to our final act, the world they made. Because the consequences of this victory, wow, they were massive, they were complicated, and you can still feel them today.
First off, let's just stop for a second and think about what was at stake here. I mean, it's pretty simple. Had the Persians won, Western civilization as we know it might just not exist. Think about it. All those incredible Greek ideas, democracy, philosophy, drama, science, they could have been snuffed out before they ever really had a chance to grow.
This victory created a brand new Greek identity. They started to see themselves as unified people, and yeah, they developed a pretty strong sense of cultural superiority. Freedom, especially freedom from outside rule, became their #1 value. And this, right here, is really the birth of that East versus West idea that has stuck around for thousands of years. Even the word barbarian changed. It used to just mean someone who didn't speak Greek. After the war, it started to mean uncivilized. And with the Persians gone, Athens, the big hero of the war, exploded into this incredible 50-year golden age. Under a leader named Pericles, the city just became the center of the universe for art, culture, and new ideas. This is when they built the Parthenon on the Acropolis, this stunning monument to their victory and their city. Now, to make sure this never happens again, Athens put together a defensive alliance. They called it the Delian League. A bunch of other city-states joined up. They all swore an oath to stick together, fight the Persians if they came back, and free the Greek cities that were still under Persian rule. It started out with a really noble purpose, a league of equals. But here's the big, tragic irony of the whole story. This league that was created to protect Greek freedom, well, Athens slowly twisted it into its own personal empire. See, as the threat from Persia faded away, Athens started saying, hey, you still have to pay us money for the navy. And then they started using that money to build all those amazing temples in their own city. The final nail in the coffin was when they moved the league's entire treasury from a neutral island right into Athens itself for safekeeping. Just like that, Athens went from being the liberator of Greece to its master. So in the end, the victory that saved Greek freedom also planted the seeds for the wars that would eventually tear the Greeks apart. It's an incredible story, and it leaves us with this one giant question to think about. What would our world be like today if the Persians had won? What if that little Greek fleet had lost at Salamis? What ideas, what art, what ways of thinking about the world would have simply disappeared from history?